Let's try. Anybody? Trisha, Anu, Moses. Anybody?
I think, can you hear me, Sean?
Yes, I can hear you.
I think Vivian pretty much did the justice to the recap. So maybe most of the things I wanted to say, she already said them.
Okay. All right. All right. 1 minute, please. 1 minute. All right. Yes, that was a beautiful recap. And yes, I'm fully set now to go. All right, that was a beautiful recap. Nice one. Nice. We'll be moving a little bit more faster today. What I want everybody to do is please let me know. Can you see my screen? Can you hear me and can you see my screen?
Yes, I can hear you and I can see your screen, sir.
Awesome. 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 Awesome.
I can hear you, but I cannot see your screen.
You can hear me, but you can't see my screen.
Yes, I can see your face.
You can see my screen now.
No.
Awesome. Let me know if you can see my screen and you can hear me as we are about to go. All right. I hope we are in a good position, in a good learning position, whatever works for you. This is going to be a little bit longer than what we had yesterday. I hope you've had lunch or you have something to munch beside you, water, and all of that.
Sir, sorry, hope I can log in with my phone because my laptop is not charged.
I can't hear you. I can't hear that.
Okay, sorry, I say I hope I can log in on my phone. My
Yes,
laptop
yes.
is not charged.
That's fine.
Along the line, you might go off.
That's fine.
Okay, sir.
All right. So, we're starting from chapter 2 today. And I want to introduce what SQL is to us today so that we understand what SQL is and what we're trying to get at, right? That's what we want to do today. SQL basically, right? So chapter 2 actually it's just a 2 slide chapter. Eh?
I cannot see your screen.
You can't see my screen, IBK.
Yeah, I can't see your screen, so I'm just seeing your face.
Oh, okay. Just hold on. How about now?
No.
Yes.
Okay, yes, I can see it now.
Awesome. All right. So today we want to talk about introduction to SQL, right? And like I said, we're moving a little bit deeper, and I'm going to increase my pace a little bit, but don't worry, nothing's going to change. It's going to be like yesterday, and even better. Awesome. So the skill that we're trying to learn is SQL, right? And so the question will be that what is SQL, right? Somehow, I've actually explained what SQL is, but we're going to go deep into it today and then understand what it does. So, introduction to structured query language. Actually, SQL is called structured query language. Structured query language, SQL. Some literature calls it SQL. SQL, like as in um, all these English people, right? They call it SQL, right? But I prefer just to call it SQL, right? SQL, structured query language, structured query language, right? So it says SQL is a domain-specific language used in programming, right? Can you see? It's a domain-specific language used in programming and designing for managing data held in a relational database. Remember yesterday we spoke about, or we talked about relational database management system. So SQL basically is the language that we use to communicate with a relational database management system. Basically, that is what it is. Forget all the plenty English that you have there. That is basically what SQL does. It is the language that we use to design and manipulate, right? So it says it is domain specific language used in programming and design, right? So although there is the industry argument that SQL a programming language, is SQL not a programming language, but I am of the opinion, right? My opinion now, I'm not right. I'm of the opinion that SQL is a programming language, right? As and is as it is as important as every other programming language, if not more important, because they all rely on SQL and what it can do to achieve what they can do, right? So it's a programming language used in programming and design, used in programming and designed for managing data held in relational database. So and or for what? For streaming processes in relational database. That's plenty English, right? So basically, SQL is that language that we use to communicate, right? That's just what you need to understand. Use to communicate with a relational database management system, right? So we use it to design, to program, to do all that we need to do with an RDBMS, right? So it says it is particularly useful in handling structured data, right? And if you remember the very first class we had, I spoke to you about data, and I told you that was that different kind of data. We have structured data, we have unstructured data, and we have both structured data and unstructured data, right? And we talked about structured data being data that you can store in a relations, which is what we're discussing, rows and columns. And unstructured data are data that they are very volatile, right? They are we call them, or they're handled by what we call big data, right? Don't let us go into unstructured data, right? So SQL deals with structured data, that is data that is in a relational form, right? Remember we talked about what a relational or what a relation means yesterday, and we said that anything that has any DBMS that stores data in rows and in columns right, is a relational database. And we say that objects that are in rows and columns are actually tables, or better still, a relation, right? So it says it is that is SQL now particularly is useful in handling structured data, that is data incorporating relations among what entities and variables, right? We spoke about entities and variables yesterday. That is, entities and variables are what forms your relation, basically, right? We did that yesterday, and I even gave us an assignment about that, right? So you take an entity as a data point and you generate variables, which are attributes, right? Remember, I said that variables are basically what forms your columns, your attributes, the characteristics of an entity, right? And we spoke about that yesterday. So it says the present dialect of SQL. Can you see? So SQL is, I want you to look at it like a language, like English language, right? And that's what we're talking about dialect. It says the dialect of SQL is ISO, International Standard Organization compliant. And that standard is, the present standard for SQL is SQL 2016. There was SQL 1999, SQL 2001, SQL 2003, SQL, and down until 2016. So the present dialect of SQL that the world has adopted, or that the world is using presently, that IT world is using presently, is a 2016 dialect of SQL. Now, why do we call it a dialect? It means that every now and then, right, a few changes occur in the language, right? A few changes occur in the language. They add a few things to it, but basically, the structure of it does not change, right? So it means that, remember, in English, we have this also in English and in Yoruba, right? Take, for example, and in every other language, right? In English language, a set of vocabulary will be released maybe after a very long time, right? And they'll be added to the dictionary. And you hear that the dictionary has been updated. That means that the dialect has been updated, or even the lexicon and structure of how we pronounce or how some words are written, right, can change, right? And it occurs. I've seen it occur at least once or twice in English language. At least they were taught in school. So it's the same thing that happens in SQL as well, right? Not these changes are usually not very fun. They're not fundamental changes, and they're just maybe syntax changes, or maybe a little bit of other variables or other functions were added and all that. But it does not take away or does not change the core of what you're learning. So whatever you learn for, say for example, I joined SQL, I think in 1999 standard, right? 1999 or 2000 no, 2006 standard thereabout. I can't remember, right? And it is still, I just update myself every time when I hear that there's a changes. I go to see what the changes is, and I master that, and I move on, right? And basically, it does not really. All of these changes are not something to worry about, right? So, and then we say SQL as a file extension of .sql, which means that when you talk about file extension, we talk about how the file is created, right? How a file is created, and I'm sure you're familiar with file extensions. Microsoft documents are usually .docx. Can you remember, or do you know that? An installation file, an executable file on Windows are usually .exe, right? If you're using an Apple, you probably have a .dmg, right? A music file is .mp3. At least everybody knows that. .mp3, .mp4. An extension helps you understand what the file is and the kind of application that you can use to access that file, right? That is what extensions are. So SQL extension, file extension, usually .sql. So anytime you see .sql, know that what you have inside of that file are probably SQL scripts, or SQL commands, right? Or SQL codes, right? So it says SQL is efficient. Somebody just join the class. Give me a minute, please. All right. SQL is efficient, easy to learn and use, right? SQL is efficient, easy to learn and use. And this is what I tell people. Please let me know if you can still hear me. If you're following me, please let me know. Right? Please let me know.
Sir, please, I can't see your screen again.
Who else can see my screen again? Hello?
I can see your screen.
You can see my screen, right?
Yes.
How about now?
No,
Yes, Abby?
no, no. I can't see it now.
You can't see it.
Yes, sir.
Whoa. Who else can see my screen? Hello, who else can see my screen?
So I'm thinking maybe she can exit and
Okay.
join again. Maybe that will help.
Yeah. All right. Just let me know if you can see my screen now. Can everybody see my screen now?
I can see your screen, sir.
Patricia, can you
Okay.
see my
Oh, no, I can't see.
Okay, what you will do is log out
Let
of
me.
class and log in again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sir.
All right. So SQL has a file extension of .SQL. SQL is easy to use, it's easy to learn, and it's very efficient, right? Now, this is what I tell people, right? Don't look at SQL basically. Don't look at SQL as if you're learning a program language, right? Because this is what it is. If you understand English language, right? I usually tell people that if you understand English language, you are halfway into learning SQL, right? You're about 50%, right? You're about 50% into learning SQL. It's that simple, right? 50% into learning SQL, right? And you would see this is not me making it seem easy. It's actually what it is, right? So if you understand English language, right, you have 50 to 60% already on your way to understanding SQL, right? So just have that at the back of your mind so that when it seems as if we're talking about complex things, you can easily relate it to English language, right? You can easily relate it to English language. Awesome, right? Now it says SQL provides what? Statement for variety of tasks, right? So what do we use SQL for, right? We use SQL to query data. We use SQL to insert. So query, we use it to insert. We use it to update. We use it to delete rows in a table. We use it to create. We use it to replace. We use it to alter. We use it to drop objects. We use it to control access to the database and its object, and we use it to guarantee database consistency and integrity, right? All of these you would understand as we proceed. All of these you would understand as we proceed. All of these you would understand as we proceed. All right, so let's jump right into it. So types of SQL statements, right? I didn't say type of SQL, types of SQL statements. So inside of SQL, right, we have five major branch of types, right? Don't mind my numbering in that slide. We have five major types, and we're going to look at it. And the types are under it. Under a type, you have related functions, right? So that is how the SQL is, or SQL types are what are grouped, right? So the first type that we want to talk about, right, after this slide, trust me, you know SQL already. That's what it means. After this particular slide, right? So SQL is divided into five different parts. Hello. Hello.
Yes,
I
sir.
think you were saying something.
I was excited. I'm going to new SQL after this year.
Yes, you're going to know SQL after this class, right? All right. So SQL is divided into 5 parts. The first one being, can you help me mute your mic?
Is it showing that they are not admitted yet? And it's showing on my screen.
Oh, now who is not admitted?
And one other person.
Their network is terrible. That's why they are in the lobby.
Can I close it on my screen? It's showing on my own screen.
Yeah, you can close it. You can close it. All right. So SQL is divided into 5 parts. You have the first part as the data query language, right? So we call it the DQL, data query language, right? If we're in primary school, I'll say after me, data query language, right? So we have the data query language, and it says these are statements. Statements are used for performing queries on the data within schema objects, right? The purpose of the DQL command is to get some schema relations based on the query passed to it, right? And under DQL, what you have is what we have the select statement, right? Now, so yesterday I spoke to you about, or I talked to you about queries, right? I taught you about query. And I said that when you send a query to Google, when you ask Google, what is the score of yesterday's football match, right? What you get from Google is that Google will tell you that this is the score from yesterday's football match. It should give you a set of results, right? And what you've done is that you've queried the database. Of course, you don't know where the database is, but you had faith that once I asked Google, Google is going to give me a set of reply that would fit what I have sent to it, right? So that's basically a query. So in SQL, basically what you're doing or what happens on the background is that when you send a query or when you send a search on Google, right, an underlying SQL statement is written for that program or for that question that you ask Google, right? And this is it. Google does not understand what is this and this and this, right? What it does is that it isolates what? It isolates the keywords from what you have asked and write an SQL statement to actually fit in what you have done, right? Don't worry, as you proceed, you understand all of that better. So when we talk about query, right? Yes, query is the way to ask the database questions based on what? On relations, that is based on tables, right? And the way to do it is that we use the SQL select statement. This is the keyword that we use, SQL select statement, to do it, right? Now, let me give you an example of what I did so that you understand. So you have a refrigerator in your house, and of course, it's supposed to hold chilled things, right, or help you freeze things a little bit, drinks, fruits, and all that. And in that refrigerator, you have several segments, or it is segmented. Some parts are for fruit, some parts are to freeze your food, some parts are for your cereals, and some parts actually for your drinks, right? And you tell your brother or your housemaid or whoever to go into the fridge to help you bring a drink, right? What have you done? You have asked the person. What you did is that you sent a query, right? And where did you send the query to? You asked that help me fetch a drink from the refrigerator, right? So the refrigerator in that sense, and if you look at it, it's actually in the form of a table, right? Your refrigerator is actually in the form of a table because what you have is a single column table that has several rows. So you have a row where you have water, you have a row where you have fruit, you have a row where you have that segment inside of it where you have several kinds of several kinds of objects that you have. So you can say that, let me show you. This is what I'm saying so that you understand what I'm saying, right? So this is your refrigerator in the house, right? And inside of it, you have all these segments where you have bottles, you have bottles here, you have maybe food in plastics and all of that, right? You have fruits somewhere around there, right? And of course, this is the door to your refrigeration or to your refrigerator, right? So you have somebody to open this refrigerator. Of course, in this part also you have some other components, right? Bottle, right? And you have somebody to, you have maybe your mate or something to come into the refrigerator or the fridge to help you pick a drink, right? So the person is going to come, right, and what? Make or execute your what? Your request. Your request is that get me a drink. So this person is going to come into this refrigerator or the fridge, right, as you have it, right? Open it and what? Go to the drink section and get you a drink, right? This person will pick this drink and bring this drink to what? To you. What have you done? What you have done is that you sent a query into what? Into the refrigerator, which in this sense is your relation, right? And you get what? You get a result, right? If the drink is available, the person brings the drink to you. If the drink is not available, what happens? They tell you that what? I could not find the drink that you're talking about. Are you following? Are you following? Please. So this is you sending a query. This table, of course, look at the refrigerator. It actually looks like a table. This is a single column and several rows. This is row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5, and row 6, right? So you have several rows in that refrigerator. That refrigerator actually serves like a table, right? So that is basically what we do with that's basically what we do with the SQL select statement. So we use the select statement to get information from tables in a database. It's as simple as that, right? Now we move to the next one, which is the DML statement. DML statement, data manipulation language. Data manipulation language. And it says this SQL commands deals with the manipulation of data present in the database. And these include inserts, which is used to insert data into a table, update, which is used to update existing data within a table, delete, which is used to delete a record, or used to delete records from a database table, right? So after you remember yesterday we said that what as DBMS, right? As a DBMS, what? Yes, let me ask you. Who can tell me what are the 3 functions of a DBMS? 3 functions of a DBMS. Anybody?
Stores, retrieve, and modifies.
Modifies.
All right. It stores, it does retrieval, and it modifies, right? Awesome, right? So we say store, right? So when you store, it means that we'll talk about storing later, right? Retriever, right, is from select. Can you see? Modification is now from data manipulation language, right? Right. And how when you say you modify something, it means that that thing must already exist before you can modify it, right? And if it does not exist, you can actually impute that before you. So modification includes inserting, includes updating, and includes deleting, right? You see that they are actually fashioned against or towards or against English language, right? They are fashioned to be like English language. So when you want to put something into your database, what do? You use insert. That's basically what it is, right? So it's English language. You use insert to put something into the database. What you inserted. So take for example, we said that the salary for Vivian when she joined the company was $5,000 per month, right? Then after 6 months, she got promoted, right? And we want to change her salary to what? To $7,000, right? How do we do that? We update our record, basically. English language. We update our record. Now, Vivian is no longer a staff as she has moved on to another company, right? And our record cannot keep being on the database. So what do? We delete and say that Vivian is no longer with us. What do? We delete. Can you see English language? Basically, that is data manipulation language, right? So you insert, you update, and you delete. That's DML statement, right? Then the next thing we want to talk about is DDL statement, still under modification, right? Now, DML statements has to do with, they have to do with the content of a table or content in a table, right? That is the essence of DML. We use DML to query a table, right? Now we want to talk about DDL. DDL languages are used to structure the database, and I'll explain that to you as we proceed. It says this consists of, that's DDL now, data definition language. This consists of SQL commands that are used to define, can you see, define the database schema, right? We'll talk about what the schema is as we proceed. Although we spoke about a schema yesterday, we said that a schema is a logical partitioning, right? It's a logical compartmentalization on the database. Can you see? It represents logical configuration of all or part of what? Of relational database. That's what you have as a database schema. The database schema is a logical what? What am I drawing? Hold on, please. Right? So a database schema is basically is a logical configuration. That's the word. Logical configuration of all or part of what? A relational database. And now we're talking about that schema, and we're saying that a DDL consists of SQL commands that are used to define, right? What does that mean? We use DDL to create what? Objects in the schema. We use DDL to create objects in the schema or to manipulate objects in the schema, in the database schema, right? So let me use the word database schema, right? So it says it simply deals with description of the database schema and is used to what? To create. So look at it. We use it to create, to modify the structure of database objects in the database, right? We use it to create and modify. That is DDL. We use DDL to create and modify. When you are creating and modifying, what you are doing is you are affecting or you are changing the status of a database schema, right? So in defining the database schema, we create and modify the structure of a database schema using DDL statements, right? And it says this includes create, right? So yesterday, I said we should what? We gave us an assignment that we should look at some data points and generate an attribute for those data points. After you have done that, you have to create that object. That is a relation. That's a table, right? What object? That object that you have created, that you have defined, we have to now create it using the create statement, right? So we use the create statement to create it, right? So you want to create something. What do? You use the create statement, right? Can you see that it follows English language? Create, right? So it says it's used to create the database, or its objects like table, indexes, functions, views, stored procedures, and trigger, right? All of these are objects in your database. So table is an object, index is an object, function is an object, view is an object, stored procedure is an object, and triggers are objects, right? We'll talk about a few of them as we proceed, right? So when you want to create a table, you create the table using the create table statement. When you want to create an index, what do? You use create index. When you want to create a function, you use create function. When you want to create a view, you use create view. When you want to create stored procedure, create stored procedure. When you want to create a trigger, create trigger, right? That's basically, so like I said, it follows English language, right? Then drop when you are done with an object, right? When you're done with an object, on the database. So what do? You say, I'm no longer interested in using this object. So what do? You drop, right? Now, drop is, remember that I said that in this DDL statement, what we are affecting is the structure, right? What we affect here, or what we are dealing with, is the structure of the database, right? The structure of the database. DDL deals with the content. DML deals with the content, while DDL deals with the structure, right? So when an object is no longer needed, we don't delete it. What we do is we drop, right? You drop it. I'm trying to see how do we relate that to English language. So you don't need a car anymore, right? Or you don't need a car for your activity today. What do? Do you delete the car? No. What do? You drop the car at home. Oh, you don't need to carry your second phone at home to work today. What do? You don't delete it. What do? You drop it at home, right? It's the same thing, right? You are just, so what does that mean? You usually go out with two phones, or with two phones before. But now, because you are not interested in going out with two phones today, what do? You drop one of your phones, right? Instead of deleting. So when it comes to content, we delete. When it comes to structure, we drop, right? I need you to understand that, right? Then what do we do? What's the next one? The next one is alter. In the alter statement, it says alter is used to alter the structure of the database. Now, in the content of the database, we update, right? We update from 5,000, salary from 5,000 to what? To 7,000. But when it comes to the structure of the database, we do not update. What we do is we alter, right? You alter it. It says you alter, you use the word alter. And from the word alter, it is to make a change, right? To make a change. So we use the alter statement to change the structure of the database. Are you following? Then the next one is truncate. It says truncate is used to remove. It's used to remove all columns, all rows in a table, from a table, including all spaces allocated for the records are removed, right? And as we proceed, don't worry, I'm going to explain truncate. Truncate is a bit more complex, right? But truncate is used to remove all rows from a table, including all spaces allocated for the records allocated for that records are removed, right? Then the next thing is comment, right? We drop a comment. We drop comment on the comment on table structure. So when you are creating anything, you can add comment to it, right? So we use the comment keyword, we use the comment keyword to what? To add comments to what? To the data dictionary. We'll talk about all of that as we proceed. Then rename. Maybe you named an object, you gave an object a name, right? Say you give an object department, right? And you discover that the name is too long and you want to rename it. And you want to call it depth instead of department, right? We use the what? We use the word rename. We use the word rename, right? So you can see that from their names, you can easily relate to what they do, right? Can easily relate to what they do, right? The next thing that we want to talk about, is that is the fourth division, or the fourth type of SQL, is the data control language, right? DCL, data control language. And it says this includes commands such as grant and what? Revoke, which mainly deal with what? Right, permissions, and what? Other control of the database system, right? So now what does that mean? I want you to look at the database, right? The database is the lifeline of a company, right? It's the lifeline of everything, right? And what do I mean by saying the lifeline? So imagine that you work for InterSwitch, right? InterSwitch, you work for InterSwitch, right? And you know the kinds of data that InterSwitch holds, right? They hold credit cards informations for their customers, right? So which means that, imagine that anybody gets a hold of your credit card. The person can shop all these the details of your credit card, your credit card details, that is the password, your secret codes, your OTPs, and all of that, right? It means the person has access to your account, right? Now, those kind of informations are information stored on the database. So imagine that what it means is that there is a guy somewhere around the world, right? Or there are some set of people somewhere around the world who have access to all of your information. They can see your credit card. They might not be able to see your password, right? Because the way the system is created is that, but actually they can actually see your password if they want to. It's as simple as that, right? So they have all your details, but because of trust, of course, the company trusts them not to be able to what? To steal users' information, right? But then what that means is that if you are in a company like a bank or like all these fintech, right? Or you're in a hospital where we keep people's medical records, all of those kinds of sensitive information. Not everybody that works in the company can see all these sensitive information, right? It would be detrimental to the company to give everybody access. So imagine that even in companies that do not even hold very serious information, it is only the people in HR that knows how much everybody is earning, right? Now, because that is considered a sensitive information, imagine that everybody knows how much anybody is earning, and you have been in the company for 4 years, and you are receiving maybe 500,000, and somebody who just came to the company last week in your same role is earning 700,000, and it is public record. Won't you go and fight your boss and say, why now? Why is this person earning more than me and all of that, right? And what does that mean? It means that not everybody that works in the database or that works in the company must be able to see all the informations on the database. Therefore, we have to be able to control access to the database. We have to be able to control what? Right and permission. Control access to objects in the database. And how do we do that? We use the data control language to do that. You grant privileges to people and you can revoke the privileges from people, right? Now, let me give you an example. Practical example, right? Now, use practical example to explain this so that we can understand, right? So you have a mechanic, right? You have a mechanic in your house. Say your mechanic came to visit you in your house, right? And he came in after he has done your job, right? Where do they sit? Will he come directly into your room to come and call, I want to see you, right? No. What does he do? He will stay in the sitting room or in the living room. Then your children come into the house and they say they want to see you. Will they wait in the sitting room or in the living room to come and see you? No. What do? They enter into the room. Your laundry guy comes into the house, right? What does he do? He stays in the living room or in the waiting room for you to come and attend to him. But when your cousin, maybe, or your auntie or your sister or something comes to visit you, what do? They have the right to come into your room, into all of those sensitive part of the house, right? To come and what? To come and see you. Why? Because they are granted the privilege to do that while your vendors and utility staff do not have that privilege. Are you following me? And that's the same thing that happens on the database. As depending, your access on the database is dependent on the role that you have. Your access to information, your access to objects on the database is dependent on the right and permission that is given to you. If you are not given a permission to use something in the database, you cannot use it. In fact, the access to log in into your account has to be given to you, right? Don't worry, we'll talk more about access, grant and revoke as we proceed. And the last one is transaction control, right? Transaction control, which is TCL, right? Command deals with what? With transaction within the database, right? And we have commit to commit a transaction, rollback to rollback transactions in case of any error in case of any error occurs, and set a save point to set a save point within a transaction. Now, what is transaction control? Transaction control helps us to drive what we call data consistency, data integrity, and data accuracy. Right? Now, I'm going to use an example. So let's assume that Ibukun has 50,000 in his account, right? Ibukun has 50,000 in his account. And Ibukun used an ATM machine to withdraw 10,000, right? What happens? Instantly, he gets an alert that 50,000, 10,000 has been withdrawn from his account, and instantly the ATM gives him that 10,000 in cash, right? Why? That is because a transaction has happened. He withdrew, which is his account will be debited, right? And he was credited the money physically, right? It is the same thing that happens on a database. When you make a change on the database, right? You can either make that change permanent or undo the change. It's like you are working on Microsoft Word and you are typing and you're keying in information or writing a book or something in your Microsoft application or Microsoft Office application, right? Please let me mute your mic. All right, right? And when you make a mistake, what happens? You would undo, or you would delete or you undo all of the changes that you've made, right? And when you discover that, okay, everything that I've done is okay, what do? You save that document, right? In the database, when we make a transaction, right? That is, transactions are actually made by what? DML. We would understand this as we proceed. DML statement and DDL statement. When we make a transaction, either through a DML statement or a DDL statement, right? And you discover that what you have done is good enough for the database. What do? We save it. We save, right? That save is also known as commit. So commit is also known as what? Save, right? We do save, Control S all the time, right? But in the database, what we do is when you say that what you have done is okay, you save it, right? If you discover that what you have done is not acceptable, right? Maybe there's an error in the transaction that you have done. What do? In normal Microsoft terms, what do? You say you undo, right? That's Control what? Control Z, you undo. But in the database term, what we do is we roll back. We roll back, we roll back, we roll back. And maybe you have a whole lot of transactions to do and you have done a particular set and you want to take a rest, or you want to create and say that, okay, I think what I've done from this time to this time is okay. You can create what we call a save point. I will explain all of this as we proceed. Please let me know if you understood everything that I've talked about in this SQL slide, right? This is SQL, and this is SQL that I've broken them down, all of this down to you. So if you look at it, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 15 keywords that makes up SQL. 15 keywords that makes up SQL. Select, insert, update, delete, create, drop, alter, truncate, commit, rename, grant, revoke, commit, rollback, and save point. All of these makes up SQL, and I've explained them to an extent. So let me know if you understood that before I proceed in my procedure. Let me know. Let me know. Let me know. Let me know.
Sir,
Yes.
do all of them come in a relational database management system?
Do all of them what?
Like, do you use all of these query languages in relational database management system?
Yes. If you come, please let me mute your mic. All right. Yes, we use all of them in relational database management system. We use all of them in relational database. You would see all as all of them or what the role they play and how we use them, right? Because yes, all of them are used in a relational database management system. All of them. All of them. Right? Any other question, please? Any other question? Please let me know if you understood what I've explained. Hello? You can unmute yourself if you want to talk. IBK, I can't hear what you're saying. If you are trying to talk to me, you have to talk clearer. And your because you are not using an earphone, I'm hearing myself. Even there. I can't hear you, IBK. If you're trying to talk to me, I can't hear you. Trisha, do you understand everything that we've said?
Yeah. Yes, I do. But not everything.
All right.
Or as we do the practical, I understand the practical.
All right. All right. All right. Anu, do you understand?
Yes, yes, fine.
Awesome. 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 All right. So we're moving to the very first one. We're moving to the very first one, which is called data definition language. Data definition language. Data definition language. DDL. Right. And if you look at so the question will be that why am I starting with DDL? For those who have probably done SQL before, they will know that DDL is not the language that you start with, right? Usually you start with select statement, that is data query language, and talk about DML, right? And then you move to DDL, right? But then with my experience over the years, I discovered that in my opinion, I think that it was the wrong way to start, right? Or it's a challenging way to start, not the wrong way to start, but it's a challenging way to start, right? Especially for professionals who need to use these skills as soon as possible. And this training is created such that it's not for academic purpose, but for use purpose, so that you can easily get to use these skills as soon as possible. So I over the years, right, I've been teaching this skill for about 14 years now. Yeah, about 14 years. 2007 thereabout when I started teaching SQL, right? And I discovered that it is better that I start with data definition language, right? We move from the creation to the content to managing the content to administering, and you're done, right? So we're starting with DTL, right? DTL, data definition language, right? Now, before we talk about data definition language, I want to show you the MySQL platform workbench so that you get familiar with it, which is what we're going to be using, right? I hope everybody can see my screen, right? You should have this on your screen if you have installed. You should have something like this if you have installed. Please let me know if you have something like this. Please let me know. You should have something like this if you have installed.
Yes, I have.
Awesome.
I have as well.
Awesome. Who else? I know Loaco, do you have it? All right. So this, yes,
Maybe when I launch it, I'm supposed to have that.
I can hear you.
When I launch the MySQL from my system, Abi, it only brings up this black screen. It's like a
Okay, that's what you have. Hold on. If you can you see my screen? Can you see this pop up on my screen?
yeah.
Yeah. So go to that's your Windows button. Click on your Windows
Yeah.
button and go to my SQL. Can you see my SQL?
Yeah.
Now click on that drop down and you will see my SQL workbench.
Okay.
Yeah, click on that workbench. It will take you to this workbench that you have.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So this is my SQL workbench, right? And yesterday I said I was going to explain to you a bit of technicality that happens on the database, a bit of technicality. All right. So I'm going to write on this slide that we have, right? So what do we talk of when you want to use the database, right? You need to be able to understand uh, the science of what happens behind the scene of using your database, right? So yesterday we started. So I want to talk about connecting to a database, right? That's what I want to talk about before we move into data definition language, right? So yesterday I made an analogy that Patricia, right, Pat is trying to send a query from a system, which is a client system, right, into the database, right, which is probably at Google, right? Now I said that this database is on what we call a server, right? I'm sure you've heard the word server before. Server is a machine that stores information, right? A machine, a computer that stores information, right? And that can give information out at request. At request. That's what a server is, right? And a client system is a machine that makes a request from a server, right? A client system is a machine that makes a request from a server, right? So, and I told you yesterday that what your um, um, your client system can be through what you have a browser that is your computer. Sorry, your client system could be your personal computer, your phone, right? Your phone, um, your game console that is PS4, I mean PS5, PS4, Xbox, whatever it is. Your browser, right? Your browser, right? What else could be? Even your printer, your refrigerator, anything that can connect to the internet, right? Basically, anything that can connect to the internet basically is your what? Is your client system. Are you following me? Anything that can connect to the internet, right? Now, we also should understand that connecting to the database does not have to be over the internet. There are two types of connection, right? If you are trying to connect to the global systems, right, you have the internet, right? That is, you are trying to connect to the global connection of computers all around the world, right? That is what we call the internet, right? But if it is information around a company, right, inside a company, right, the information that does not go around, but it is a company server, right, we call that an intranet. Are you following me? So you have the internet and you have the intranet. So basically, as well, the same way you are trying to connect to the internet, right? You can also connect to the intranet, right? The internet means you are trying to connect to the public domain, right? The general public domain all around the world, right? But this is a private domain that is private to your organization. Please let me know if you understand what I'm saying so that I know if I'm breaking it out enough or not, right? So what I'm saying is that your you can want to when you want to retrieve information, right? You can either retrieve information from the internet right? That is, if the information you have or you need is from the internet, right? Or you probably work in a bank and you want to get information about client information. Those informations are not the internet, but they are on this company server, right? And you are connecting through or to the intranet. That is, you are connecting through the computers around or inside your company, right? So we call that intranet, right? You call that an intranet. Now, you have what we call, so we have, in this kind of situation, what you have is, the kind of connection you have is called a client server environment. And the question is, what is a client server environment? A client server environment is when a client is trying to retrieve information from the server, and the server is trying to give information back to the client, right? The client system is trying to what? Retrieve information from the server, and the server gives what? Gives a result. So the client queries the server, and the server gives what? Result, right? So you have a movement from client to server, and you have the server to client movement, right? Now, to understand this better, this situation is what you have anytime you are trying to use your phone to access Google, or you're trying to use your laptop to access Facebook, or you're trying to use your browser to access Twitter. What you have is a client server environment. Whose mic is that? What you have is a sorry. What you have is a client server environment. What you have is a client server environment, right? So anytime you try to use your iPad, your tablet, your personal computers, your phone, your game console, your browser, whatever, to get information, you are the client. The information does not reside with you. You're trying to access the information from an unknown computer around the world, but you're using a protocol, right? I'm not going to go into deep networking class, right? But you're going to use a protocol to get that information, right? But that protocol links you up into a server, right? Links you up to a server. You query the server, and it gives you what information, right? So that is the process all across the world, right? But there are situations when the client is not, when the information is not on your system, right? You say you have a client server environment. That is, the client is on a different machine, the server is on a different machine. Like you have when you want to query Google. Google is not on your phone. The database of Google is not on your phone. But what you have is that you have a web browser that you can use to access Google. True. So you are the client, and you are accessing information that does not even, that you don't even know where they are, right? You don't even know where those information reside, but you're trying to access those information. That's a client server environment, right? That is a proper client server environment. But in situations where the client and the server are on the same computer or system, right? We call this a stand-alone environment, right? Usually also called a local domain, right? We call this a standalone environment. Now, what does that mean? It means that, remember in the first scenario, the client is on a different machine, the server is on a different machine. You don't even know where the server is, but you are the client. For this time around, the client and server is on your system, and that is what you have installed. The installation that we did for everybody is a standalone environment. What does that mean? The client and server are both on your what? On your computer. Are you following me? Remember that when we were installing, we first of all installed the server, then we installed the client, right? Now, both are on your computer. Both are on your computer. So everybody, every installation, Ibukun is running a standalone system. Anita is running a standalone system. Patricia, you have a standalone system. Anoluapo, you have a standalone system. Vivian, you have a standalone system. I also am running a standalone system, a local domain, a local host, local domain system. Why? The client and the server are on your computer, right? Now, what does that mean? Let me show you, right? When you want to connect, look at it, right? When you want to connect, can you see local instance? Can you see local instance, right? This is your, if you look at it, it says, welcome to MySQL Workbench. MySQL is the official, MySQL Workbench is the official graphical user interface, GUI tool for MySQL. It allows you to design, create, and browse your database schema, work with database objects, and insert data, as well as design and run SQL to work with stored data. You can also migrate schemas and data from other database vendors to your MySQL, right? So in this situation now, I'm trying to now look at it. These are models that I've created. Don't worry about all of this, right? What do we have here? All right, so we're not migrating. Let's go back to home, right? This is migration, right? Yes. So we're not migrating. What we want to do is we want to make a MySQL, we want to connect to the database, right? This workbench, right? This workbench is a client, right? So what it means is that I'm going to run the two scenarios for you. This is my system, right? Or your system as it were, right? If you are working with, say, GTB Bank, no, yes, that's GTB Bank, right? GTB, and GTB's database is in Australia. GTB's database is what is in Australia, right? And of course, if you are working in a bank before, you discover that they use what we call a form, right? A application form, right? To interact with the database, right? What happens? This person is a client, right? It's trying to connect what to the database somewhere in the company, right? And a connection is created. So the person gets a connection is created, and they can query and retrieve information. This is that the server and the client and the server are on two different systems, right? But in our own case now, right, we have what we call MySQL workbench, right? And we're trying to query the database. Are you following me? Now, also we're trying to send query to database, and we're trying to receive information from database. But the challenge is that, or the situation is that, both of these are on the same computer, the client and the server. So when you initiate a connection, right, your connection is not going out of your system. As much as I want to initiate a connection now, I want to connect to my database, right, from my workbench. This is my client. I want to connect to my database. It's going to connect because I have both my connection, my server, and my client on the same hardware, right? So I'm just going to click local instance, right? Can you see it's opening SQL editor? And I have connected to my database, right? I have connected to my database. I've connected to my database, right? I'm going to go back to that again and say, let me use a new connection, right? Let me use a new connection. Can you see? Now it is asking me for my password. Look at the service. It's saying MySQL at 127.0.0.1, right? Now, if you are familiar, I'm not sure if you are familiar with computing, right? Anytime, let me clean all of, okay, don't worry, let me continue. Anytime you have a client and server on the same system, right, your protocol will be 1.127.0.0.1 column, then your port number, right? Don't worry, I'm going to explain what all of this means, right? I'm not the kind of person who teaches and just leave you in the limbo, right?
Sorry, Phil.
Yes.
Is that the same as IP address?
This is actually an IP address, but this is a local domain, local host, local domain IP address, which means that the client and the server are on the same system. Do you understand? Yeah, yeah. But if you are trying to, so in the case of this client trying to access this database, this person has to have the IP address of the destination, right? So you say 192. Sorry. Right? So let's go again. You work with GTB, right? And you want to access the database, right? You're going to have to access the database, what we call an IP address, right? The database is on a particular address. You as a client are on a particular address. So it's two people all over the world, all around the world, trying to talk to each other, right? This person is going to reach out to the, so you're going to use the IP address of the server to reach the server. And the server is going to use the IP address of the client to reach the client, right? So that is how we connect. So when you are connecting over the internet, it's the same thing. You are given a public address, right? That public address is you. It's like a BVN. It's like your identification over the public domain, right? But it's in a intranet environment, right? Each person, each system has an IP address that represents them in the company, which means that this IP is in charge of everything that you do, right? It's like your address in the company system, right? So that is what you have. Now, I want to talk about connection. I want to continue my talk about connections, right? About connections. So when you are trying to connect, right? When you're trying to connect, and this happens for every type of connection that you have, right? Happens for every type of connection that you have. When you're trying to connect a client to a server, right? On the server is where you have the database, right? So you're trying to connect a client to the server, right? This client is sending a set of information, right? A set of information to the server, right? But for the server to understand, is like you want to ask a guy sees a girl, right? Sees a girl in no, not let's not even use that, right? So somebody wants to come and see you, but in your house you have a gate man, right? Or in your company you have a gate man, and somebody wants to come and see you. The person does not just walk directly into the company and says, "I want to see this person." What happens? The person would actually probably meet the gate man and says, "I want to see this person," right? Then the gate man comes in over the intercom and ask you and say, "Do you know this person? Do you want to see the person?" Right? That gateman serves as an intermediary, as a connector between the person who wants to see somebody and the person who wants to be seen, or who the visitor and the person in the company or in the house, right? There's a person in between that generates that connection. When that connection is generated already, what happens? That middleman logs out, which means that the person comes into the company and begins to talk to you. He does not need the gate man anymore, except for when he wants to see you the next day or another time, right? Now, what does that mean? It means that also on the system, right? Whenever the client wants to connect to the database, either on a standalone system or on an internet or intranet system, right? Anytime there's a connection, right? There's something we call the listener. The listener is like a ear, like a EAR, ear, right? Like a ear, my right? That connects the client to the server. The listener is like The listener is also called an instance, right? Is also called, or is in the right sense actually, is not called an instance. Let me correct that so that I teach you this thing right, right? Is part of the instance. The listener is part is part of the instance. Hold on a minute. Let me change to generator. I mean to NEPA. They brought like this. Give me a minute, please. Apologies, I'm back. I'm back. Back. Right? Now, so I was talking about the client and the database server and the listener. Now, so the listener is part of the instance. We'll talk about the instance later, but the instance is like the guy that controls connection or that controls the connection between the client and the server, right? Now, I just want you to understand this thing so that you get it, so that you're not a novice to what is happening on the system, right? Please let me know if you can hear me. Please let me know if you can hear me.
I can hear you, sir.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Who else? Can everybody hear me? Madam Anita, try to unmute yourself and talk to me.
I hear you.
All right. Guess everybody can hear me, right? Awesome. Awesome. So let's continue. Right? So now the the listener, right, is like an ear, right? That needs some set of information, right, from the client. The listener needs some set of what information from the client before he can allow the server to what? Or before he can allow the server to what? The connection between the client and the server. Like I said, this is your listener, right? This listener is expecting some set of information from this guy, right? That says that once you have it, you can enter, right? So it's like a gate man that is saying that, okay, who do you want to see? Do you have an appointment? What time did you say you should come? Did he give you a number? Where is your document? All of those kind of things. That when you say, okay, I have all of that, and it can ascertain that you have all of that, right? And you pass all the requirements, all the entrance requirements, the passwords and everything. What happens? It connects you to the database, right? So the question is, what is the listener looking for? The listener usually expects the following from the client: the protocol, right? the port number, the port, the service name, and password. These 4 information are what the server is, the listener is looking for. The listener is looking for what is the protocol that controls the connection. Usually, this is TCP IP in most cases, TCP IP, right? Then a port number, right? The port can be any number depending on the connection, on the configuration of the server, right? Right. Let me show you the port here. The port here is I think my own connection is saying 3306, right? So the port that this is expressing is the server on my system is listening at port 3306, right? Is also listening on a service name, right? The service name usually is like the IP address for your connection, right? This is one, which is also your host, right? Or just call it to the host, right? On this one, it is 127.0.0.1, right? And the password, of course, my password, right? Now, what the listener does is that when you send an information, a connect information, like I did here, once you click connect here, let me hold on. Right? Let me cancel this. Once you click connect, look at it. If I click connect here, what happens? It logs me in instantly, right? Why does it log me in instantly? Because I passed all the information. The connection that I made had all the 4 requirements. That's why I can access the database, right? That's why I can access the database. I'm going to come back here. I'm going to come back to home and show you. So imagine I'm trying to create a new connection and I click on it, right? And I put the wrong password. Let me just put a wrong password, right? And I say, okay. Can you see? It says cannot connect to the database. Why? It says your connection attempt failed for user root to the MySQL server at, can you see the IP address and the port? It gave me 127.0.0.1 colon 3306. It says asset denied for user root at localhost. That is, it's telling me that I'm connecting to a localhost system. That is a local domain. Using password, yes. Can you see? What it just told me is that what? I'm connecting through the service name. My service name or my host name is localhost. I'm connecting through a password. This is my protocol and this is my port. Now, it's saying, how do I rectify it? Check that my SQL is running on this address. That is, I should make sure that my host name is right. That's what it's saying. That my host is listening on, or my host is on 127.0.0.1. That's check that my SQL is reachable on this port. That is, my SQL is listening to this port number. Check the user root. Check the user root. User root has the right to what? To connect to this IP address from my address. That is, my SQL right defines what client can connect to the server and from which system. That is what it's saying is that I should make sure that I have the permission to connect. I have the permission to connect, and I make sure that what that's port. Make sure you are using both providing. Make sure you are both providing a password if needed, and using the correct password for what? For 127.0.0.1 connecting from the host address you're what? Connecting from. Basically, what it's saying is that, let me go back to that. What it's saying is that the information that I provided must be correct, right? So this gateman was what stopped me from what? From logging in. He's asking, is my protocol right? Is my port number right? Is my host or service name right? And is my password what right? If out of these 4, one of them is wrong, it will deny you from what? from logging in. It will deny you from what? From logging in, right? So which means that your protocol must be right, your port must be right, your host or service name must be right, and your password must be right. Once these four informations are correct, what happens? It creates a connection. Are you following me? Once this four is connected, what happens? It creates a connection for you. So you have something like this. This is the database, right? Once this is correct, once all the four are correct, right, the listener creates what we call a connection, such that you are connected to this is the client, and this is the server. On it, you have the database, right? You have a connection. That is, this is connected to this. Then what happens? The listener dissociates, is not longer involved in that transaction anymore until when you disconnect, right? When you connect, hold on, when you connect, when a connection is created, what happens? We say that when a connection is established, right? Connection established. When a connection is established, what we say is that a session has been started for you, right? We say a session has been started for you. That is, you are connected to the database. You can now what? Use your privileges, right? Use your privileges to do all that you need to do on the database. Now, what happens when you log out, right? Now, when you log out, say you issue a logout, or you exit, or you close your client, you close your client application, right? What happens? Your connection is disconnected. That is, when you log out, when you exit, when you close the client app, you are disconnected from the database. What does that mean? It means you are no longer connected to the database. So if you want to connect again, what happens? You have to go through this process all over again. The listener comes in again and says that, guy, who do you want to see? I want to see the database. I want to connect to the database. Do you have the right protocol? Do you have the right port? Do you have the right service name? Do you have the right password? Once you have all of this, what happens? A connection is established for you again, and a section is started for you. Please let me know if you understand these plenty things that I just explained. Please let me know as we proceed. Please let me know. Please let me know. Waiting. Please let me know.
Sir, could you please throw small light on you talked about instances like the listener, the middle person, or the middleman connecting the client to the server to get the database or something. You made a mention of instances. Let me understand it all.
All right. So basically, okay, let me just clean all of this, right? See that question you asked me, right, is a very technical question, right? I'm not supposed to go into details of that, but yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to try to explain it as simple as it is, but it can be a bit complicated, right? I'm going to explain it. Don't worry. I'm going to explain it. So, most databases, right, do not most database literature on all this simple database usually do not go in details of these things, right? But I learned this from Oracle, right? I learned this from Oracle. And of course, Oracle controls MySQL now, right? I told you that yesterday. Oracle controls MySQL, right? Now, when you talk about a database server, right? So I've been talking about database server since morning, right? So when you talk about a database server, right? So this is my server. Wow, beautiful. Server, right? And on it is the database, right? So server is actually a machine, a computer, right? That has information stored inside the database, right? Now, when you have a server is made up of two things, right? It's made up of two things. You have two things inside a server. You have what we call the memory structure, and you have what we call the data file. The memory structures and the data file. The memory structures and the data file. These two make up what we call a database server, right? Now, your memory structure is attached to your RAM, right? Everybody knows what a RAM is. Read access memory, right? And your data files are in your read-only memory. That is basically your hard drive, right? Your hard drive. That is where your data files are. So your data files are actually your data, right? And that is what the data files is what is stored inside the database, right? And the database is kept inside the server. So I need you to understand that, right? Now, your memory structure is very important, right? So think about this server, right? Think about this server as a human being, right? It's actually a human being. Truth be told, it is actually a human being because it does everything that a human being does, right? So as a human being, what do you have? You have your memory structure and the data files, right? Your memory structure as human being is in the mind. So our mind is our memory structure, right? We process information through our minds, right? And when we process information through our mind, after we have processed it, the ones that we want to save, where do we save them? We save them in our what? We save those information in our what? Brain, right? Some people say that the mind is inside the brain. I do not believe so, right? So you have your mind and you have your brain. So the memory structure is your mind. Your data files are inside your brain. Are you following me? Now, when you kill a person, listen, when you shoot a person or when you kill a person, what do you kill? The first thing that is disconnected is the mind, right? The first thing that is disconnected is what? Is the mind. Then the brain what? Goes eventually, right? Now, let us reverse that process that I just explained, right? When a human being wakes up in the morning, right? You are sleeping and you wake up. What happens? Most of us do not go through or understand the process of waking up, right? When you wake up, you go through the process of there's a slow process, right? Now you are trying to, we say you are trying to regain consciousness. This also happens to people who goes into coma, right? You say you're trying to regain consciousness, so you're trying to, or the first thing you're trying to understand is where am I? Now these things are very fast, so we don't really think about them. But this is what is happening, right? You're trying to first of all understand where are you, right? You want to understand who am I, where am I, what am I doing at the moment, right? But all of these things are very fast, right? This is what happens when you wake up in the morning. When you sleep, now, I want to be very careful in saying this, right? But when you sleep, right? When you sleep, there's some sort of disconnection between your mind and your brain. Now, what does that mean? It means that when you sleep, your brain is actually there, but it's not really working. But your mind is what keeps you alive. Even though it is not at full work capacity, but your mind is there. It's just sleep, it's not asleep. That's why you can dream, right? That's why you can what? You can go into dream or you can have dreams, right? And if you look at it, sometimes when you have a dream, that dream, you try to remember the dream when you wake up, but you cannot because the brain is not involved in the whole process of dreaming, right? Now, the brain is active right? Science has made up understand that actually the brain is active, but the brain is not involved, right? Now, so when you dream, right? When you dream, you're actually doing that dream with your mind. When you wake up, what happened is that the mind has what we call a control. Now, everything I'm saying here just related to here, but I'm going to go back to it. The mind has what we call a control file, right? The mind has what we call a control file. And what does this control file do? This control file is the most important file in the world, in your body, right? Because in this control file, it contains the list of all the data files in the brain, right? Now, this control file is now, so when you wake up in the morning and you are trying to regain consciousness, what you are doing is that you are trying to attach your mind back to the brain. In computer world, you say that you are trying to mount your data file on your mind. That is, you are trying to attach your mind to your brain, or you are trying to attach the brain to the mind, so that when they ask you what is your name, you can remember. If you wake up very early in the morning and somebody comes and asks you, who is the president of Peru, right? What happens? If it is not because you just woke up. Now, when I say wake up, it's not that you are using 10 minutes to wake up. Of course, after this happens in seconds or in milliseconds, your mind and your brain are connected almost immediately, right? But there's a process to it. If you wake up now, it also depends on how fast the mind is, right? Some people are very fast mind, some people are very slow mind, right? Some people boot for minutes when they wake up. Some people, like me, my brain is mounted instantly or very fast, right? So I don't spend time trying to um, associate my mind to my brain, or no, I'm not the kind of person who wakes up and takes minutes to try to get himself and all that. No, for some people, they take time to get themselves, right? But is the process is the same. It's just different. It's just depending on the capacity of the mind and capacity of the brain, right? Now, so when your mind is mounting and somebody asks you a question that you're not very familiar with, what happened? You are going to first of all think about it and begin to check your control file. Well, of course, you don't know that it's the control file you're checking, but you're checking your brain to say, okay, I know it, right? Now, instantly, what happens? What you did is that you did a passing in your mind, P-A-R-S-I-N-G, right? You did a passing. Your mind did a passing on the control file. Sorry, your mind. Don't let me. This is becoming a bit technical, but it's all right. Just follow me, right? Your mind did a passing on the control file to say that, is it an information that I have? Oh, yes, it's an information that I have. Then your mind reads that information, that it understands it, then it gives you back a query. I mean, it gives you back a result. So you query that, you write an SQL statement in your mind and say, okay, what is the. So sometimes when you repeat the question, what you are saying is that you are trying to query your what? You're going to query your database. Who is the president of Peru? Oh, I know it. Then you give a result. Are you following me? Now, it's the same process that happens to the database, right? It's the same process that happens on the database. When you, so let me I just use the human analogy so that you understand this whole process, right? But there's a big science to all of that. There's a big science to all of that, right? Don't ask me how I know these things, right? There's a big science to it. Now, back to computing, right? Or back to database. So when you start, we see these things even on our computers. When you start your computer, your personal computer, right? What do you see? You see a black screen that gives you some white text and all of that, right? Now, then all of a sudden, what happens? Your system starts doing a circle, that's Windows circle. It starts doing that Windows circle, then it says welcome, right? You see that first black screen that you see is your memory structure. That first black screen that you see is your memory structure. At that point, your hard drive is not working yet. What is working is your RAM. But there are some informations on your RAM that these informations are the mind. They are like the installation process. They are the mind of your computer. They are what is needed for your computer to survive. They are the software, right, that runs the hardware, right? So they are the software that runs the hardware of your system, right? So those information, we call them BIOS, right? That information runs. Then, while that information runs, there are some files that are read. Once that files are read, then your hard drive, that is your operating system, is now mounted on the memory structure. Then, when that is mounted, it asks you to log in. Once you log in, what it means is that your database is now open to you. That is, your hard drive is now open to you to access. Then you can now begin to access your documents, your files, your movies, and all of that, right? Now, it's the same thing that happens on a data server. The memory structure is where you have the listener. So, of course, there are several background processes that I'm not going to name. There are several of them. There are several of them that you have in the memory structure. So, in the memory structure, right, on the memory structure, you begin to have I'm sorry, in the memory structure, your memory structure is divided into two. You have what we call the SGA and the PGA. Don't worry about it. It's not supposed to be in the content that I'm supposed to teach you, but I just want you to understand what is happening. So you have what we call the SGA and the PGA. The SGA is called the System Global Area, and the PGA is called the Program Global Area. These two makes up the memory structure, right? And these two is the mind of the system, right? Now, it is inside these two that you have what we call the listener. Basically, inside your SGA, actually, that you have what we call the listener, right? Now, the listener, the job of the listener is to what? Help you establish a connection with the data files, right? Help you establish a connection with the data files, right? Now, the SGA contains about 8 components, 8 to 10 components, right? And the PGA contains about, well, it depends on the kind of server you're using. It contains about another 6 components, right? I'm not going to go into it, right? Now, just know that when you are trying to start up your system, the first thing that gets started is your memory structure, right? Once the memory structure is available, you can now what? Work with the data file. So anytime you are trying to connect to your system, what you meet on the way first is a component, one of the components of the memory structure, which is your what? Your listener. The listener is now the guy, the in-between guy. I'm going to draw it like a air that has an airing between you and the database. This is the client and this is the server, right? So you want to make a connection. The connection goes to the listener first, right? Now, the listener is expecting 4 components from you. And we said that those components are your protocol, your connection protocol, your hosts, your connection protocol, your host, your ports, and your password, right? Your passwd. Once all these 4 are passed, are checked by the what? By the listener and passed, what happens? It connects you directly to what? To the data server, such that it is now no longer needed in that connection until when you disconnect. Please let me know if you understand all of this, right? Now, truth is you might not get all of this at the same time, right? But if you go through the video after and over again, you will understand it. They're actually very simple, right? It's a simple process. It's a very simple process. But please let me know if you understood what you have learned in the last minute. Anybody?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
This is Anita.
Please, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't. There's chapter 3. Did you start from chapter 3 today, or you started from chapter 2?
We started from chapter 2.
Okay. I joined when you're doing chapter 3.
Oh, you joined us in chapter 3, right? Although chapter 3
Yes.
is not chapter 3 is not plenty, it's just 2 slides, right? Not,
Okay.
just introduce the whole SQL statements. Of course, you are familiar with these guys. Select, insert, update, delete,
Yes. Yes.
create, drop, alter, truncate, comment, rename, grant, revoke, commit, rollback, and save point.
Okay.
Yeah. That's all.
Okay. I'll go through the video.
All right. So, about on the
Okay.
connection part that I just explained,
PDF. Mm.
if you have a question, let me know.
And sir, you said we were talking about the server connecting to my SQL. That's what we were talking about. And so I wanted to ask you, are we supposed to open our server and connect it? Because we're talking about password and the
Yes.
server port and all that. So I didn't really get that part.
Okay, so this is what led to that conversation. I said that when you want to connect to the database, right, we use this client environment, right? This workbench. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Yes. And I said that once I click on connect, right, you can do that from these guys, or you come to
Mm.
database and you click on connect, right? Or you use Control U connect. Once you do any
Okay.
of right, it logs you in, it allows you enter into the database. And I'm going to show you, this is the database, right? This is what you have, right? You see that the
Okay.
interface is different now, right? This is
Mm-hmm.
what you have. So I'm not saying that what happened. You see that it took almost immediately for you to log in, right? Less
Yes.
than 0 seconds, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
just explained the science of what happens for that to happen, for you to log in into what happened in that split second. In that split second, from you clicking this guy to entering into the database. I'll just explain what happened inside of it.
Okay. 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 I understand.
Terry, is there any slide for us apart from
Eh?
the class that is recorded? Is there any slide for us apart from the class that is recorded?
Yes, you're going to have the slide. I'm supposed to have dropped it. I'm going to drop it today. I forgot yesterday. I wanted to drop it today.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. All right. So can I move on now? So I want to believe that at least to an extent, right, or to a good extent, you understood all this explanation about the connection, right?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. Now we want to start with data definition language, right? So, data definition language, right? And in data, before we begin to talk about data definition language, we need to understand what the database objects are, right? When you understand the database objects and how to name them and the data types, then we can now begin to use them, right? So, database objects there are several what objects that can be created on the database, and these objects all play an important role in the database, right? So, what are the objects that you have on the database? You have the following are database objects. Table. What does the table do? It stores data. It's as simple as that. Then we have what is a view? It says a view is a subset of a data from one or more tables, right? That is, a view logically represents subset of data from one or more tables, right? One or more tables, right? So when you say you have a view is a subset of a data, which means that is a subset of a table, which may of one or more tables, which means that a view cannot exist on its own. It exists based on a table, on some tables, right? We'll talk about views later. Then we have indexes. Indexes or index helps us to improve the performance of query, right? We'll talk about indexes later as well, but indexes are easy and they help us a lot. They help us to improve performance of query. Then we have sequence, right? Sequence are used to generate numeric values, right? You want to generate 1 to 1 billion. You don't have to generate them by yourself, right? And say be typing 1, 2, 3 by yourself. You can easily generate a sequence by creating a sequence, right? Then we have synonyms. You say synonyms gives alternative names to an object. That is, when you have an object that has a long name and you want to call it with a shorter name like an alias, right? You create a synonym. Don't worry, all of this you will understand as we proceed. Now it says note. There are more database objects that are not covered in this course. There are more database objects not covered in this course, right? Because in the scope of this, right, as a database, as a data analyst, and all of that, right, these basically are the objects that you are going to be using, right? Although there are several objects like triggers, procedures, packages, database links, and all that, but those are more advanced objects and that we would not be needed, right? Awesome. Naming rules. Naming rules. How do you name an object on the database? Now, if you're familiar with, if you have been in my R class, or you've been in my SQL class before, or you've been in any programming class before, you understand naming rules, right? Naming rules, naming an object in SQL follows the same programming order. This database object must conform to these rules for naming any object. It says all database object names must begin with a letter, right? Either you are creating a variable like in programming or in Python or in R or in Java, or you are creating an object in SQL, the name of that object must start with a letter, right? It must be 1 to 30 characters long, right? This you have, it can be so long and it can be so short, right? So it can be 1 to 30 characters worth long. Remember that in the alphabet, you have 26 characters. So it can be 1 to 30 characters long. It says can only contain capital A to Z, small a to Z, 0 to 9, underscore, dollars, and hash. That is, you can only use these components in your name. That is, it can be a capital, it can contain a capital letter, it can contain a small letter, it can contain a number, it can contain hash, and it can contain the dollar sign, right? It says not database object names must not be duplicated, or that is not duplicate the name of another object owned by the same user, which means that you cannot have a name. Say, take for example, you have a name called employees. You cannot create another object called employees. You have a table called employees. You cannot have another object called employees. It's like you give birth to 2 children and you are giving them the same name, right? Would it make sense? No, it would not, right? You give birth to 2 children and the firstborn is shown, the secondborn is shown, right? It would not make sense because you will not be able to differentiate. Of course, they have different personalities and all of that, but you will not be able to differentiate. When you call Sheon, both of them will answer, right? So it's the same thing that we try to avoid on the database, right? Objects in the same owner, that is owned by the same owner, should not have the same name, right? So if I create an object called employees, Vivian can create another object called employees because those objects are owned by different users. But she cannot create in a schema, she cannot create another object with the name employees because she has a table called employees already. You cannot use a DBMS reserved words, right? DBMS reserved words are words that are used to create the software itself, like MySQL. You cannot create an object and name it MySQL. You cannot create an object and name it column. You cannot create an object and name it row. You cannot create an object and name it create. You cannot create an object and name it insert, right? All of those reserved words that is created. Now, I don't have a list of reserved words, but we use our common sense to understand that I think this word is a reserved word, right? So you have to avoid reserved words in giving your when naming your database object. Now, this is the ultimate of the advice. Use descriptive names for database objects. That is, when you are creating an object on the database, try as much as possible to give the name. Let the name of that object reflect the function of that object. I'll say that again. Let the name of an object reflect the function of that object. So take, for example, if a table is going to contain student information, if a table is going to contain student information, right, I can easily name that table student details so that it reflects what the table is supposed to do. I hope you're following me. Now, I say note, database object names are not case sensitive. So if you like type them in capital, type them in small letter, you will still get them when you need them. Right. Please let me know if you understand that. Now we want to move to data types. Data types. We want to move to data types. It says, now, remember when we were talking about creating objects yesterday, and I was talking about, let me go there so that you can know. Right. When we're talking about attributes yesterday, right? We said these attributes are properties of entities, right? And it says every attribute is defined by its set of values called domain, right? Called domain. So I want to explain what that domain is, right? And why do we have to give an object a data type, right? So every attribute has a domain, right? So take, for example, we're going to use an example like we used yesterday. So we had an example called students as our data point, as our entity yesterday, and we started generating attribute for it. So we say the student must have a first name, must have a matric number, right? Must have a surname, must have a phone number, right? Must have an email address, right? So I'm going to stop at email, right? Must have an email address. Now, these are attributes of a student, right? These are attributes of a student. Now, what is the domain for each of these attributes, right? When we say domain, right, that's plenty English. The question is, what kind of data will matric number be? What kind of data will first name be? What kind of data will last name, will surname be? What kind of data is phone number? What kind of data is email? When we say kinds of data, right, we're saying that in the nature of the kind of data that is going to be stored in that column, what type of data will it be? Is it a numeric data? Is it a alphabetical data or character data or text data? Is it a date data? Is it whatever it is, right? And that's what we call data type, right? So every data has their kind of data type. Now, it says a database contains a database table contains multiple columns with specific data types, such as numeric and string, right? It says MySQL provides more data types other than just numeric and strings. It says each data type in MySQL can be determined by the following characteristics, the kinds of value it represents. So what kind of value does matric number represent? What kind of value will it hold? It says the space that takes up and whether the value, the space that it takes up and whether the value are fixed length or variable length. We'll talk about that. Then how MySQL compares these values to a specific what? Data type. Now, plenty story. What does that mean? When you have students, right, and you have the attribute, this following attribute of student, right, we need to understand that when you are creating your database, right, or you're creating a table, and you have talked about the entity, you have identified the entity that is the data point, and you have identified its characteristics and its characteristics or properties. You also need to determine the data type or the kind of data that these characteristics have, right? So take, for example, you will have matric number. When you say matric number, from the word matric number, now, it depends on your work environment or your environment, your work environment. Take, for example, right? Some universities, I'll use my own university, the university I graduated from, right? Our matric number is integer, that is number by a nature, right? We do not have character, right? So our integer, our matric numbers are what? Numeric in nature, because they are created with just what? Numbers. That's what it means, right? So there are some schools that, so my, take for example, my matric number was 143 715, right? That was my matric number. So in this situation, this is the kind of data. Therefore, it's going to be integer. That is int. Can you see it here? Int. A standard what? Integer. Int. A standard what? Integer. Int. A standard what? Integer. Right? So that's going to be integer. If you're going to be using MySQL, that's going to be what? Integer. Right? Now, some other schools, they have matric number like I'm sorry. Let me use this. They have CU slash 2021 slash 232 hyphen FA, right? They have this kind of, this is the way their matric number looks like, right? If you're not familiar with it, maybe you went to a good school, right? But I know that polytechnics majorly and some other schools, college educations in Nigeria and all that, they use this kind of matric number, right? Now, if you look at it, in this matric number as an example, there are different types of data. This is a string, that is alphabet, right? String. This is number. This is number. And this is what? This is string, right? So we cannot call it and say that it is number, generally that they are numbers or they are what? String, right? Now, in programming, there has been what we call allowance for combination of type of data like this, right? So in this situation, instead of if this is the format for your matric number, right? Therefore, it will not be integer anymore. It will be what we call a variable character, varchar, right? Varchar. So it will be variable character. And if you look at it, it says varchar are a variable length non-binary string. Variable length non-binary string, which means that it can be 1, it can be 2 in numbers in length, it can be several things in length, right? Up to what? Up to the length of 30, right? So it is variable length non-binary what? Non-binary string. So we use varchar for this kind of what? Situation, right? But if it is just number, take for example, it will be integer. Now, first name, right? If your first name column is going to what? Hold the what? The first name of the person, right? And if it is first name and it has to do with what? With string, that is alphabet. We also call, so I'm going to use this as what? Say integer, right? That's the data type, right? And the data type must have a length, right? The data type must have what? Must have a length. So we say the highest length that anybody can have as the matric number is 8. That means that matric number will be what? 0 0 0 0 0 0 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1 2 9 9 9 9 9 9 9 9 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Right. So we're saying that the length of matric number can be from what? 0 0 0 0 0 0 1 to 9 9 9 9 9 9 9 9 9 9. Right? That is the length. That is the length that a matric number has. So every number in between this can be what? Can be matric number. That's what it is. Right? So then for first name will be what? Will be varchar2. Right? Will be varchar, sorry. Will be varchar. Because why? It contains what? Variable what? Variable length character. That is, when we talk about variable length character, also just know that you're talking about strings, you're talking about numbers, you're talking about alphanumeric characters, right? So that's variable length, right? Variable as varchar. Surname would be the same, variable length, varchar, right? Phone number, right? Phone number, if your phone number is going to be just, it's going to be 080, just 0029327302, right? If it's just going to be this, then it is what? An integer, right? But if it is going to be a phone number, hold on. If it's going to be a phone number that contains +234 8029327302. Remember that plus is not a number. and it is not a number, and it's not an alphabet. It is what we call an alphanumeric, right? It's a special character, basically. A special character, sorry. It is called a special character. Therefore, the only data type that allows for what special type would be what? Varchar. Varchar, right? So phone number, if it is just numbers, and if it has plus sign, then it's what? It's varchar. Of course, email is also what? Is also varchar. Right? So you now have to put the length. What will be the longest length for your first name, right? You say 25. You say last name can be longer, 30, right? Phone number, if it's integer, right? Just say that, like Nigeria, our phone number is 11 in number, right? So you say 11. Email can be 50, right? So accommodate people with very long emails, right? So now you have what? This entity, you have the attribute of the entities, and you have its domain, its data domain, the kinds of data that it will contain, right? So you have them that like we have them. Now it says that the following are the common, don't mind me, are the most common data type used in MySQL. So you have integer, we have decimal, which is a fixed point number. We have float, which is a single precision float point number. We have double, we have character, which is char, which is a fixed length non-binary character string, right? So when you talk about character, right, in this situation, you have something like M and F, which depicts male and female, yes and no. That is, it is fixed. It cannot be more than one. It cannot be more than what? It cannot be more than one, right? So you have male and female, you have yes or no. You have situations like that when you have distinct values like that. Then we have date, which is the date value, and the date value has a default format of the century, the year, the month, and the day, right? That's why we have CCYY -MM -DD. That is how the date format is on the system. So if you look at today's date now, today's date is 20th. If we're going to write today's date on the database, it's going to be 2021. This is the century, this is the year, right? -09, right? Remember that it is two digits, so it's 09 -05, right? This is how the system will store today's date, not 090521. This is wrong, right? Whatever other variant that you have is wrong. This first one is the right one. That is the system format for date. Then we also have time as the next data type. And you have what? Hours, minutes, seconds. Hours, minutes, seconds. So if you are going to write what says the time presently, the time is 7:42, right? So, 5:42, right? Hour is in double quote. Hold on, in double figure. Right? Hours is in, so you have time will be 05, right? 05 minutes. How many minutes? Sorry. So you have 05 column 42 and seconds, maybe 22, right? So this is how time is what is stored, right? Then we have what we call the date time and the full timestamp. The date time is the combination of date and time, and the full timestamp is also the combination of what? Date and day. So today is today is what? So if you want to put together a full timestamp, it will be the century, which is 20, the year, which is 21, the day is 09, the month is 09, the day is 05, right? Then we have what hour, 5 minutes, 5 hours, what minutes, 42 minutes, and what seconds, 27 seconds. Of course, the seconds has increased in time. So this is a full timestamp in the database. Then of course we have what? Year as a data type that helps you what? Get the year out of what? This is a year value in CC YYY format. The CCYYY format. Please let me know if you understood all that I just explained to you.
Sir, sorry. I want
Okay.
to ask
Okay.
the
Please go ahead.
the integer is just for numbers. You use the
Yes, it's just for number.
integer for numbers, okay. And
Yeah.
the VACA is
Yeah.
for like
String.
numbers and alphabet.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, excuse me, sir.
And
The
okay, Madam
hello,
Anita.
sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. The float and
And
I think the
decimal.
float and the decimal. Yes, you didn't explain that.
Yeah.
Then there is also end car. What is end car used for?
Anchor. Okay, good. Right. So decimal, of course, is a fixed point number. So when you talk about decimal, you're saying that's 0.2, right? This is your decimal, right? This is your decimal, right? Float is also a single precision float point. So decimal and float are actually the same, right? They are actually decimal numbers, right? So you can have salary, somebody's salary as 5,000.82, right? You're saying that to precision, right? You're saying to precision, this is, in fact, decimal, float, and double are the same, right? This is a single float is a single precision. So when you talk about single precision, you are saying that 5,008. That's single precision. That's for double, right? That's for float, right? For double, it will be 5,000.823. This is to double what? Precision. So this is to double. It can be more than, you can say that your PS P comma S, that is precision now. That's what we're talking about. Your PS is equals to what? 3. Then it will have 3 decimal places. If you say 2, you have 2 decimal places. And if you say 0, if you say 10, it will have in 10 decimal places. So that is what decimal, float, and double is. NCal NCal is also a data type, right? Although not in MySQL. I think you have NCal in R programming. I think you also have it in Microsoft SQL, right? NCal, the function of NCal is like this character here. It is a fixed length character. Fixed length. NCal is what we call cap in what? In MySQL. NCal is a fixed length character that says that this character, this data type must not be the length of character in this data in this column must not be more than 2, must not be more than 1, right? So you have male, female, male, female, male, female. So you cannot have variable length. It has to be a fixed length. Every data in that column must have a fixed length. So the n there is the number of lengths that it can be. So it can be 2, it can be 3, but all the content inside of that column would have the same length. I hope you understand. I hope you understand.
Yes, I understand. Then this Baka is for
Matcha is for when you have a data type that has, or you have a data that has both numbers and characters and special characters that we use for Matcha.
okay, sir. It's clear. Thank you.
All right. Any other question?
Sir, but these are not the only data types
Yes,
to
there are
work with.
advanced data types like row num. So we have more data types like row num, club, blob. Um, um, there's a whole lot of them actually. Sorry, not blob, right? Club, rob. There's a whole lot of them. Several data types because it depends. Now, if you are working with maps, say for example, or you're working with characters that are up to 4 gig, right? There's the kind of character that you use for text that are up to 4 gig in length. There's a kind of character that you use for data type that you use for text that are 2 gig in length. There's binary as well, right? So there's a whole lot of them, right? But we don't come across these kinds of data regularly. That's why we don't really talk about them. You actually find them discussed even in literatures, right? Right. Take for example, map, a picture. They all have their data types. So because you can actually put pictures in columns, right? So they all have their data types, right? They all have their data types, but they are not regular content or regular data in databases, right? So that's why we don't really talk about them. But there are several of
So
them.
I asked a question.
Okay.
In the rule we saw previously before now, you said the characters be the data type should be like from 1 to 30.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, you said it should be one from 1 to 30, the character long. How come for the var chart you said you can actually impute up to 50? There was where you even put 50
This
as when
is this
create.
is yeah, I understand you. So this is the name of an object. This naming rule is
Okay,
for the name of an object. It's not for the content in the object.
okay,
The content in the object can be any length, right? But the name of an object has limitation.
okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Any other question? All right, so let us continue. We still have a long way to go. I hope that we can finish chapter 3 today before we go. So, having said that, we want to start creating content. We want to start creating tables, right? And before we do that, I'm going to go to my MySQL and just log in into my MySQL. Right? I'm going to close. I think I've opened plenty of connections here. I'm going to close all these connections. I'm going to close this connection and I'm going to establish a new connection, right? So in this place now, I'm going to say a new connection. I hope I can remember my my password, web, right? So I can't, let me try it again. Um, awesome, awesome. That's the password, right? So this is this is the MySQL workbench, right? This is the MySQL workbench. This is the MySQL workbench. This is the MySQL workbench. This is how it looks like. So you have a new connection. You have a file. That's your menu. You have file. On that file, you have creating new models, new tabs, new open model, open SQL script, all of the administrative that has to do with you working with the content or you working with the what's it called with the application. Yeah, right. Of course, we all know how to open and how to save. You want to run an SQL script. A .SQL script is what you need here, right? So basically, that's what you have here. You want to save your scripts, you can save your script here, and you want to exit the application. If you click on exit, the section closes. Remember, I told you that when you click on exit, your section closes because the application is going to close. So that's what you have in file. And in edit, you now have how to format your document and preferences and all of that. Then view, you can change the view on how you want it, right? By choosing how you want the panels to be. Are you looking for hide panel, side panel, show secondary panel, and all of that, right? Then we have query. This is where you control your query. You can execute the query. You can execute the query statement. Stop a script from execution on error and so on and so forth. Perform a commit, perform a rollback, and all of that, right? Then we have the database connection. You can connect to the database from database. You can manage connections. You can reverse engineer your database. We'll talk about that later. You can use schema with transfer wizard, how to transfer a schema from one database to the other. Migration wizard, you want to migrate a database from a different system to your system. And edit type of mappings and for what? For generic migration and all of that. Right? Then we have all these um server environment, server configuration related tools or related applications here. You have server. You want to know your server status, your client connection, how many clients are connected, client connections, user privileges, status privileges, data export, data import, start and shut down the database, server logs, file options, dashboards, report, performance schema setup, management access settings, and reset safe password for connection. So you can do that from that. Then you have what tools? We have configuration. That is, you want to perform backup and recovery, or backup and restore. Utilities, you want to talk about how to copy and copy as PHP code. That is, you want to connect to a server, and also starting the shell for what MySQL utilities. Then scripting and all of that. So then also you can check for help. You can look at documentation. This was one of, you remember when we were installing, we asked you to install documentation. This is documentation. So you can read whatever you need to know from MySQL just by clicking on the documentation, right? You can teach yourself from the documentation, or if you need help, you can get help from what? From documentation, or use your index, your help index to get that, right? And you can also check for updates and see what version of MySQL, of MySQL Workbench or what you're using. I'm using 8.0.2.25, right? So that solves that basically. And where you have this cursor blinking, this is your cursor, and this is your workspace. This is where you will type all the codes that we need to type, right? Inside of here, right? And these are accompanying icons that we use in executing what? We use in executing commands and statements and codes, right? And schema, remember we talked about schema. This is where we talk about, this is where we have all schemas. These are all the schemas that I have or that are created. And this is where we perform administrative functions. And yes, we generate our output. We see our output from here, output here, and basically that is, and we see the database that we are connected to, or descriptions of objects in the information bar here. So basically, this is what the MySQL interface looks like. Don't worry, you will get used to it, you understand it, and you as we grow. So you can use these sidebars to adjust the way your workbench looks like. So if I click on this one now, can you see? It eliminates the lower bar. If I click on this one, it eliminates the left sidebar. And if you click on this one, it eliminates the right one, the right sidebar. It displays and eliminates. So that is how to work with the workbench. Please, I need you to take 2 minutes to familiarize yourself with the workbench while I get water to drink, right? Please open your workbench and get familiar with it. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Please, I'll be back in 2 minutes. Please, you can stretch your leg for under 2 minutes so that you don't doze off. Get something to drink, stretch your legs, and we start back in under 2 minutes. We're going to start by continuing by 8:06. Okay, let's do 4 minutes. This is 6 o'clock, 6:01. We'll convert back by 6:05. Right? Stretch your legs and get familiar. While you are getting familiar with the workbench, you can also get something to drink, stretch your body, and just exercise a little bit. Right?
Excuse me, sir.
What is it,
Hello,
ma'am?
sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, how do we get familiar to our workbench? I'm trying to open my SQL, but I don't know. Just say welcome to my SQL.
Screenshot what you have on WhatsApp.
I should screenshot it. Okay.
Just
Okay, I will send it to you.
snap and send to me on WhatsApp.
Okay, all right, sorry. All right. Go and put it where you collected it. You start that one. Yes, ma'am. You are done, have you? Yes. Okay. Have you seen the money? He has not sent it. I have not seen the money. Okay, let me tell you. Please, you should not be missing class. I did buy you. Guys, please, last month. I only miss one class. I make up for it on a Friday. Yeah. Yes. Okay. I miss one so that I make up for it on a Friday.
Madam Anita, please mute your mic, please.
Okay. Oh, sorry, sir.
I'm back. I'm back. Where's everybody? I am back. I hope we're not tired. I know, look, are you tired? I hope we are not tired. Talk to me if you are there. All right. We have done about 3 hours, 10 minutes class. And we have less than 1 hour to go. I want us to finish by 7 so that we can rest for work tomorrow. Right? So let's get going. All right. So what we want to talk about now is the create table statement, right? Remember we're talking about DDL, data definition language. We're talking about DDL, that is data definition language. Sorry, it's a bit ugly. Data definition language. Yeah. Right? Now, create is a DDL language, right? Create is a DDL language, right? And we use data definition language to modify the structure. Remember this, please. The structure of the database, of the database. So think about the DDL statement as you having a house. Think about DDL statement as you having a house that you have a house that was just 2 rooms before, and you want to increase it to 5 rooms, right? So how do you do that? You use create to create new rooms, to create new stores, to create new city rooms and all that. So that's basically what we say when we use DDL. So we're trying to work with the structure of the table of the database, right? That's when we begin to use DDL statements, right? So it says that for you to create on a database, what do you need? You must have the create table privilege. For you to create anything, actually, it's not just create table. For you to create anything, remember that I've told you that what you cannot do anything you do not have privilege for on the database. So when we get to privileges, you understand. Data control language, right? Or yeah, data control language, DCL. You understand that, but you cannot do what you do not have privilege for in your database. Your driver does not have privilege to enter into your kitchen and go and make eba or make rice, right, in your house, right? Your laundry person, right? Your laundry man does not have the right to go and make a soup for himself or for you until when you give the person that privilege. Your driver does not have the privilege to go and work on the lawn, right, in your house until you say, okay, I'll give you the privilege to do this. Your children might not have the privilege to go and withdraw with your ATM until when you give them your PIN code and give them the privilege to do so. So it's the same thing on database. You cannot work on something if you do not have the privilege to do that. And the same thing with create table. For you to be able to create a table on a database, you must have the privilege to do that. That's one. Then also you must have a storage area. Now the storage area comes when your account is being created on the database. When they create your account as a user on the database, a storage area is allocated to you. That is, that storage area is where everything that you create on the database is stored for you. Are you following me? That's the essence of the storage area. It's like your room on the database. So everything that you create, remember in your house, you say that this room is for Vivian, this room is for Anita, this room is for Patricia, right? And nobody goes into that space and says that it is my room. No, everybody knows that that is Patricia's room, right? It's the same thing that you have in the database. Every user on the database must have a space, must have their own space or their own storage area, right? And especially when you work in organizations that uses database and all that, they will give you a space for all your activity, and everything that you do is stored in that space, right? So you must have creative privilege, and you must have a storage area. Then it says you must specify. So how do you create a table? You must specify the table name and the column name, the column data type, and the size. Right? I'm going to show you the syntax and explain the syntax to you. I'm going to try a few examples, right? Then it says create table statement is one of the DDL statements. So can you see data definition statement? It's one of the DDL statements, right? It's one of the DDL statements. It's one of the DDL statements that are what? That are a subset of what? Of the SQL statement. Used to create what? To create, modify, and remove database structure, right? So it says this statement is what? Auto commit, which means that they are immediately what? They have an immediate effect on the database. Remember, what did I call commit to us the last time? Who can remember? When I was explaining the SQL statement and we talked about commit, I gave it another name. Who can remember? Give it a try. There's no bad answer. Give it a try. Anybody? Vivian, Anu, Tricia, Anita, anybody? All right. Right. So when we talk about commit is actually save. Remember, I told you then. Save. Right? Commit is save. And I said that when you perform something on a database, right, they are not automatically saved, especially when you use DML statements. Right? They are not automatically saved. So you have to save it. It's like you work on a Word document. And if you do not save, the document is not saved, right? But also on the Word document, we can enable auto save. Can you remember? That is saying that automatically save my document every 5 minutes. We can do that on Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, and all that, right? And the same thing we can also do on the computer, right? Whenever you use a DDL statement, remember DDL statements. Whenever you use any of these guys, create, drop, alter, truncate, commit, and rename. Any of these guys, create, drop, alter, truncate, comment, and what? Rename. They are what? Automatically saved. They are auto-committed. That's what we mean. They are auto-committed. Right? They are automatically committed. And what does that mean? It means that they take immediate effect. We see their effect immediately on the database. Right? We see their effect immediately on the database. And all of this you will see. There's no hiding it. You're going to see it in under maybe 3-4 minutes when we begin to create table, right? So, but before we create table, right, before we go forward, I want to talk about something very important, right? And that is how to create a schema. Create database, right? Which is in MySQL known as what? Schema, right? So when you want to create a database, of course, when you open if you look at your workbench, you'll see that you've connected to it, right? But you do not have a database to work with. Are you following me? You do not have a database to work with. So we want to create a database. We want to what? Create a database. We want to create a database. So how do we create a database? Right? So we use the create database statement. Create database, the name of the database underscore name. Right? Database underscore name. Now, you must terminate. I forgot to mention this. Anytime you write an SQL statement, you must terminate with semicolon, right? You must terminate it with semicolon. Also, just note that you must terminate your SQL statement with semicolon. So I'm going to give an example here. So we say create database Avita, right? It's as simple as that. Create database Avita. Now, I want to show you another client system, and that's where we're going to go and create database, right? Before we do that, let's try that on MySQL and see, right? So, all right, let's go to, please let me know if you are following me, right? Let me know if you are following me.
Yes, sir. I follow you.
All right, so we want to create database. Now, to create your database, go to MySQL on your list. Please let me Right. Go to MySQL here from M here. Go to your MySQL, or that's in your programs, all programs. Go to MySQL. Open the MySQL folder, right? And open MySQL. Can you see MySQL 8.0 command line client? Can you see it? There are two of them. It is the first one, not the one with the longer name. MySQL 8.0 command line client. That's what I want you to open. So we open that. We open that.
Sir, is it the same thing for everybody? Like,
You are using Apple, right?
yes.
Apple. I'm not sure you have that client. I'm not sure. 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 Okay, you know how to get your terminal, right?
Yes.
You know how to get your terminal. Open your terminal.
Excuse me, where did you say we should go to?
You come to your Windows, this part of your Windows, right? Open your please let me mute your mic. MySQL, go to MySQL, right? Can you see where you have all the MySQL applications, right? MySQL, then click on MySQL command line client. Command line client. Click on this one, this particular one. Can you see my cursor? Click on it, and you would have something like this. Right? You have something like this. If you are using Mac, open your terminal, and in your terminal, right, type MySQL and hit enter. Let's see what you have. All right, so please follow me.
I'm saying command not found.
Command not found, Abby.
Yes.
Don't worry, we'll deal with that later. Don't worry, we'll deal with that later.
Okay, sir.
Right? But just follow me. Just follow what I'm trying to do. Right? So this is my command line client. This is another client. Can you see? So my SQL workbench is a client. And this command line is also a client. You see, these two guys, they do the same thing. But this is a command line, and this is the graphical user interface. Everything that we're going to do in this graphical user interface, right, we can do from this command line. Are you following me? Everything that we're going to do on this beautiful one, this beautiful background that we have, we can do from this guy, right? We can do from this guy. So they are both the same thing. Are you following me? So I'm just going to type in my password. Right? Can you see? So I'm inside my MySQL now. I'm inside MySQL. I'm inside MySQL now, right? Now, so the same way I'm inside MySQL in this place, in this workbench, is the same way I'm inside MySQL in this command line, right? Now, remember we said we want to create a database. Now, the reason why we came here to create a database is because this is where we have administrative permissions. On this command line is where we have administrative permissions, right? So I have administrative permissions on this part, not on, I'm logged in as an admin on this platform, right? And so it's easier for me to create my database from here. So I'm just going to say create database. Let me know if you can see what I'm typing. Create database Avita. Okay, see, I terminated it with what? With a semicolon, right? I terminated it with a semicolon, right? If I hit enter, oh, it says that can't create database Avita. Database exists, right? So let's use another name. Create database ABC, right? Let's create the database ABC, right? If I hit enter, now can you see? It says query OK. One row affected. Then it told me the number of seconds it took it to run that query. So the database has been created. That's what it means, right? How do we know? So after you've created your database from the command line, you switch to your workbench. Switch to your workbench. Let me know if you have done that. I want us to do this together. Let me know if you have done that.
No, sir, I've not done mine.
Please try and do it.
So where do you say we should go to? You say go to Windows. Please, can you take that part for me? Let me see.
Say come to your Windows button here, right? Then come to look for my SQL folder.
Okay, my SQL folder.
Yes, something like this.
Okay.
Hmm? Can
Yeah,
you see
I
it?
get it. Yes, I can see it.
Then click on MySQL 8.0 command
8.0
line.
command line.
Line.
Okay.
Yeah, click on it. Then your command line will come out. It's a black screen
Okay.
to come out. Right? So on that command line, what you need to do, the first thing it will ask you to do is to type in your password. Remember that when we're installing, I asked you to create a password that you can remember. So type in that password. Type in that password. Are you following me? So once you have typed in your password, right, what we want to do is it will welcome you and tell you that this is welcome to MySQL monitor, blah, 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 and all that. Then we want to create a database. So you can say create database ABC, create database ABC, create database ABC, right? Create database ABC and end it with a semicolon and hit enter. Press enter. Then it will tell you that what the query is okay and one row is affected. Let me know when you have done that, please. How many of us have that? I know, do you have that, please? Anita, Madam Anita, do you have that? Vivian, Trisha, Patricia
Yes,
can.
sir.
That,
I've done my own.
I can't do it.
Yes,
Can't
Vivian,
do
have you
mine.
done
Sir,
yours?
I can't. My laptop is off. I'm just using my phone.
Hey.
I'm where I can't charge. Like, I don't have the charger
Oh,
with me.
okay. Okay, just follow. Right. So when you create the database, right, you to tell you query, okay, one row affected. You can try this when you get to Patricia would fix your system later, right? Then you come back to your command line, to your workbench, right?
Workbench.
When you come to your workbench, you will see, can you see this part? Can you see this part where I am? Administration and schema. Can you see? Administration and schema. Can you see? Administration and schema. So click on schema, right? Click on schema. Click on schema. And reload. You see a reload button, a recycle button, or a reload button, right? A reload button, not a recycle, a reload button. You see that button. Can you see? Please, I need the response. Can you see that button?
Now, where is the button? Please, can you point at it?
This is the button.
Okay.
Yeah, can you see it?
Uh,
Yeah, if you press on that button, can you see that ABC has shown in the list of database? It wasn't there before. If you load yours, you see that you have ABC now as a database. Do you have that?
yes, I have it.
Awesome, awesome. So now, once you have that, right? Once you have that, do you have a space like this in your work area, like this white space? This cursor is blinking somewhere like this, like a query one.
No, I don't have that.
Okay, if you don't have that, if you don't have this query, then come to file, come to new query tab. File, then new query tab. File, new query tab to open a query tab. This one that most people do not have their.
I have
Do you
that
have
now.
this?
Yes, I
You have
have.
that now?
Yes.
Awesome. Please let me meet your mic. This one that most people do not have their system with them. This would force us to come to a stop as fast as possible, right? Because this is we trying to do practical, and I don't want us to miss this part, right? I don't want us to miss this part. So I'll just explain a few more, take questions, then we'll round up for today, right? All right. So now that you have used AB, now that you have ABC, what I want you to do is the first query you're going to type is use, right? Use ABC, right? Use ABC. Use ABC. That is the first query that you are going to type. Now, what does that mean? It means that we want to use this database, right? We want to set it to use. We want to, that is, or it is on that database that on that schema, or the schemas are database, right? Right? It's on that schema that we want to now begin to create our tables and everything that we want to use it to work, right? We want to work in that partitioning, we want to work on that database. So if we say use database, right, it would activate that database, right? If I run it, it will activate that database. Now, how do you run your query? Select your query, right? You select everything. I've typed outside. So you can select your query or select your code by clicking and dragging over the code, right? Or you just press on the number. Press on the number and it will click and drag for, it will select everything for you, right? Click and drag, click on the number, it will do that. Then you see this flash. Can you see this flash button? That flash button, run, that is execute, right? That is execute, right? You use that to execute your query, right? Use that to execute your query, right? Use that to execute your query. So I'm going to select everything and I'm going to run that query, right? Can you see? Now, what did you notice? You will discover that immediately I ran that query, the first thing is in your output, you see that it marked, there's a green button, there's a green icon, right? That can you see that I just selected now in the output? It tells me, it tells us the time of the number of query that is query number 1, the time of execution of that query, the SQL, that is the action that was done, the message that is returned, right? And the number of seconds it took that query to run, right? Now, having said that, right, that is the result from the query. Now, another thing that you will notice is that immediately I said use ABC, the ABC schema was expanded, right? Use ABC. I'm going to close that again and I'm going to run this again. Watch that part, watch this left part. Immediately you run it, if I select it, immediately you run it, ABC becomes expanded, right? It becomes expanded as you can now see the components inside of it. You have tables, you have views, you have stored procedures, and you have what functions, right? Right? So, I would love to start creating tables today, but a whole lot of people do not have their system to practice, and that would be a major blocker for us. So I think we should wrap up today. We have had a good class, even though we have a lot to go through. So which means that next Saturday, we would have to finish up on chapter 3 and chapter 4. Chapter 3 and chapter 4 next Saturday. So that by Sunday, we're on chapter 5, right? So please get your systems ready. get your systems ready. If you have anything that you need to help me, I need to help you do, reach out to me so that we can get that sorted as soon as possible, right? But we will stop here today so that by next class, what we've done today is I've taught you how to create databases or how to create a database, right? And don't forget the assignment that I gave yesterday. Please do the assignment. And yes, we'll meet by next Saturday. The video for the class I would upload to YouTube and drop the link on the group so that you can have access to it, download it, and watch so that you can learn more on your own during the week. Any questions, please? Any questions?
Yes, sir. You said you also dropped the slide for some.
Sorry, I'm back. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
All right. Apologies, my network kicked me out of class, but I'm back, right? Of course, we have finished class for today. I just want to take your questions, and if you have any questions, please ask me. I'm going to do, yeah, Vivian was asking if I was going to drop the slide. Yes, I'm going to drop the slide after class so that you can have the slide as well, even though I've not completed the slide, but I'll drop what I have with you so that you can have that. Any question? Any question?
Yes, I have. In the assignment you gave, sir,
Yes, sir.
you said we
Yes.
should create 5 data points at our
Yes.
workplace.
Yes.
So I'm like, is it like with the staff or about the organization? Because the last one we created about students,
Yes,
the
it can be
attributes of
it can
students.
be anything that you think is worth keeping data for, what's generating data for, and what keeping data for in your company. Anything.
Okay, 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 sir.
All right. Vivian, any question?
No, sir, no question.
All right. All right. So thank you for coming. God bless you. See you on Saturday. Please and please try as much as possible. Once I drop the video, try as much as possible to go through the video again during the week. Remember that if you can do 1 hour every day on SQL, you would be very, very great at it. Right? So try as much as possible to schedule that into your put that into your schedule this week. And yes, be active on the group. Ask me questions, do your research, ask me questions. That way you would learn better and you learn faster. This is a journey. SQL is just one of these technologies that we're going to be learning together. So please let us, if we have a good start now, right, we'll be able to do more and get to our destination fast, right? So by next Saturday, we'll continue from where we stop. Thank you for coming. Do have a wonderful evening. You can log out of class now. Bye. Have a wonderful week as well.
Bye, sir.
Bye.
You too, sir. Bye.